What's up guys, welcome back. So last time we did a how-to video, it was all about deadlift. You guys loved it, you left us loads of comments and said, can you please show us how to do squats? So that's what we're gonna do today. On a note of the deadlift video, we will reapproach that in a few months' time or a few weeks and progress on it for those of you a little bit more advanced. But today we're doing squats. We're doing low bar squat, high bar squat, and front squat. They are all a little bit different. Not massively between the front squat and the high bar squat, but certainly the low bar squat. They move in slightly different ways. They use certain muscles a little bit more predominantly, and they will be better suited to some of you than others. Typically on your biomechanics, if you have very long femurs like myself, but we will go through all that, so don't panic. The first thing I'm gonna say about squats is, some of you watching this might not be able to do anything of what I'm about to show you. And that's totally cool. It's quite common, and you will find that you're gonna have to go away and work on your flexibility and you're using just a bar with no weight before you can actually start squatting, because you just don't have that flexibility there. A lot of that is down to kind of us not being used to just taking our butt to the floor, arse to grass as people say. So we're not used to being in that position. So we kind of use the ability to get there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna break it down. The first thing I wanna show you that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my Olympic lifting shoes today. Why am I using these? One, because they've got a really hard sole, which is great, and they've also got a little heel raise. This helps you put you in a really favorable position in terms of ankle flexibility when you're squatting. Ankle flexibility is something a lot of you are gonna struggle with, but if you haven't got lifting shoes, I will show you a little trick to help you out with a little 1-2-5 plate, but bear in mind you still need to work on your ankle flexibility. So with that being said, let's get into it and let's start with the high bar squat. So the first thing we're gonna look at is feet position. With our feet position, we wanna take our feet either underneath our hips or shoulder width apart, where you feel comfortable for jump. Again, this will vary per person. But bear in mind, if you start with your feet underneath your hips and your toes are pointing forwards, if you try and squat, at some point, either your gut or your thighs, whichever's biggest on you, is gonna hit each other. And this is gonna block your range of motion. So what I suggest you do is just turn your feet out ever so slightly. So if you've got a very, very narrow grip, bring it to hip width or slightly wider. Just humour me, try it, see how it works for you. And I want you to just ever so slightly, just turn your feet out ever so slightly to point them off. What this does, it pre-engages your glutes, which are a big, strong muscle, because they can start to work nice and early in your lift. But it also moves your hips open. Basically, it moves your femurs, your thighs, out of the way of your hips and allows you to drop nice and low into your squat. So if my feet are wide apart and my toes are turned out, it allows me to drop nice and low into my squat and back up again, which is awesome, because the more range of motion we get, the more muscles we get working. There's no point, well, I say there's no point, it's not favorable to do quarter or half rep squats. One, because it puts more tension on your knees, because you're breaking with your knees opposed to your hips, your hamstrings, and your big kind of power back posterior muscles. But also, if you're doing kind of quarter reps, you're just predominantly working the quads and you're neglecting these muscles, and that's a good way to get muscular imbalances as well. So you want to get full range of motion, and that's what we're working to. And the lower you get down in the squat, the more you find people will drop off because they don't have the flexibility. They might have a big butt wink, their ankles might be lifting off the floor, they might not even be able to keep thoracic extension and they're curling over. These are all things we're going to talk about. All right, so let's start with the high bar squat. The high bar squat does exactly what it says on the tin. Basically, the bar starts nice and high up on the body, yeah, up here. So once you nip your shoulder blades together, you create a natural shelf for that bar to sit on. Most people will find that more comfortable and they will start with this lift. The low bar squat takes a lower grip, right? It's down towards the rear delts and on the scapula. So what's the difference between the high bar and the low bar squat apart from bar position? One, the mechanics of how you actually do the lift and the muscles that they predominantly work. With the high bar squat, you actually start the movement by breaking with the knees. The knees are the first thing to move. With the low bar squat, the hips come back and they initiate the movement, and you load more weight into the hips. The high bar squat is slightly more quad dominant. The low bar squat, once you're comfortable with the technique, you will find is normally the lift that you can use the most weight on, hence why power lifters who are more kind of concerned with getting as much weight up as possible use the low bar squat. Those of us that have kind of tender knees or worried about putting too much tension through our knees might decide to use the low bar squat. Those of us that tend to have shorter femurs, are a little bit closer to the ground and quite compact, are normally epic, I mean absolutely awesome at the high bar squat. Watching someone who's got great proportions and biomechanics for a squat is awesome. Like, they just look great. Their back is lovely and upright. They drop straight down into it. They've got normally quite stocky legs. They squat a lot. Hamstrings hit the back of the calves and they bounce straight out of the hole. What I would say in terms of squat depth is you want to be going nice and low in your squats. We want to be getting our hip crease below the top of our knee. We want our hands relatively close to our shoulders. Get your hands where you want them to be and keep them there. Take yourself under the bar, pull down on the bar and apart. So we're doing this with the bar, yeah? That keeps it nice and tight. Find my position, both feet are under it. I've got down and locked, I'm in my position and I'm up, okay? And that's my position from where I'm gonna do my high bar squat. What I will say with the high bar squat is elbows, they want to be kind of in line with the body or here. A lot of I see is what we call chicken winging. When people have got the bar up and they don't have the flexibility in their bodies, so their elbows are out here. This is going to do one thing and it's going to send you that way. You don't want that. You don't want to be chicken wing. So you need the flexibility to keep your hands down here and your elbows nice and tucked under and pulling that into the bar, keeping the back nice and strong because we want that integrity. Same as with the deadlift. We want everything to be lovely and solid so we can transfer that power through the floor and up rather than losing it through weak links and wobbly parts of our body that are not stable and compact. So in terms of breathing, I'll do it this way. I know a lot of lifts like bench press, they're like, breathe out on the way up and breathe in at the top and breathe out on the way up. Do you know what I mean? All these kind of breathing techniques. But what we're trying to do actually is we want to maintain as much kind of spinal integrity as we can. Not only do we want a neutral spine, a straight spine all the way through, but we actually want pressure on the spine. And what kind of braces our spine? Our abs. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to really kind of fill up and kind of expand our diaphragms. Take a nice big deep breath in, and then brace the abs as hard as you can. Kind of brace those abs, and that's what's going to support your spine. So all the way through your lift, keep that brace on you. Brace your... And either the top quarter, or even not until you get to the top of your lift, so you let your air out, and then you repeat. Nice big deep breath, brace everything to keep that spine locked in tight. Okay, so let's jump into the technique of the high bar squat. So like I said, the high bar squat actually starts with kind of knee breaking to start with. So again, find your hand position and keep them there. Take yourself under the bar, wiggle around, get your back locked in, pull down on the bar and apart to keep that back packed in. Take a nice deep breath and stand up. Remember, this is chicken winging. We don't want that because remember, if we chicken wing, what happens when we squat? We go there. We don't want any of that. We want under here, nice and tight. So with there, we take our feet slightly wider apart and we turn our toes out. So I'm gonna start in a kind of a neutral position. I walk the bar out, then I just widen my feet to find my spot and tip my feet out. So with the high bar squat, the first thing that happens is knee breaking. Okay, so the knees are the first thing to go. This bar path, basically this bar at the moment is in the mid to back half of my foot, this bar. And I want it to ideally stay as close to that line from where the bar is now to my heel and the mid part of my foot all the way through. So through this lift, I want to try and keep it as close to that. So what happens is knee break, I'll do it real slow. So you see what happens there? Basically, the first thing that happens is knee. I'm not going here and sending my toes forwards. I'm literally just starting the movement with my knees and then my hips are coming back, okay? Because I want to keep this bar in the midline and I want to keep my chest up as high as possible. So it's like this, it's deep breath in. So when it comes to the eye position, so where you're looking, is don't be looking with your head up here because that's not neutral spine, and don't be looking right at the floor. What I do with this wall, because it's very close, is I find a point on the wall and I look to it. The point that I'm looking at is about just above my belly button height. If you've got something further away, you can put an X on the floor because you've got further distance to look, but you're just gonna have to work it out for your parameters and you can find yourself a point to focus on that keeps you in that neutral spine position. If you looked, when I came down, hopefully, I'll see when I look back, is the bar was relatively in line from heel to here. And the bar didn't travel too far, my hips came back, I sat down, nice and comfortable. What we're looking for here is this maintained back. I am lacking a little bit of flexibility in my lower back at the moment, just through lack of squatting. And what people get is they get this butt wink here. Can you see? If I do that, my spine now is not straight. That's lordotic, almost a little bit lordotic, that kind of extension there, that's gone. That we want to avoid. So we want to be really keeping that up there so we can power up and through. Spine integrity is probably the most important thing with a squat because if your back starts to bend, you've got uneven load in the spine and that we do not want. Another quick little pointer is when you're coming down with the bar is you've got your toes slightly turned out, so your knees are going to follow your toes, yeah? What I want you to do is keep them over your toes, but on the way up, don't let them track in. These knees need to stay here, so force them out a little bit so they stay in there. They need to stay there over the feet. If you're coming down and they're doing this, Nobody wants that, nobody wants that. So on the way up, it's down with the bar, power up through the heels, through the midfoot, squeeze the butt, and up to the lock. Really squeezing this butt all the way through. That's a big driving muscle. That's gonna keep you locked up and straight at the top. You're gonna take a wider grip, yeah? You're gonna bring yourself down, you're gonna bring the bar down to the lower down your back. You'll find a new shelf just about on your rear delts, and that's your new position. Right, what's important here is my hands. See, my thumbs aren't locked under, or my wrists. Because if I am, because unlike the high bar, where the bar just sits comfortably on the shelf, with a high bar squat, you could take your hands away and the bar would stay there. I mean, you're not gonna squat doing that, but it would actually stay there. With the low bar squat, it's not. And because there's a lot of weight on there, you would not expect your shoulders or your wrists to be holding it in that position. So much like the front squat, which we'll go into, the actual job on the low bar squat of the hands is this. It's compressing the bar down the back. And I don't want my thumbs underneath, because if my thumbs are underneath, it has the tendency to load the weight into the hands and onto the shoulders. And it's giving me shoulder pain in the past when I was doing it wrong. So what you want is your hands over here, thumbs up, and you want that almost like a flat hand. So you find your grip, you bring yourself to your position that you want. Again, you pull down on the bar and you wrap the bar around you to find your position. And that way, again, my elbows are just behind the bar. So, unlike the high bar squat, where my arms are relatively underneath the bar, the low bar squat, when I'm back here, my elbows are just behind the bar. They're not here, they're just behind the bar, just giving me that little bit of rotation and that pressure on the bar, keeping it located on my back. So that's how we're gonna put our bar in position. You have to have a little play around with it and find that natural shelf for you and that comfortable position. But now we've got that bit, the same setup with the breathing applies. Let's go into how the actual movement of the exercise works in terms of initiating the movement with the hips this time. So when it comes to the high bar squat, the same thing applies in terms of breathing and the setup with the feet position and everything. But what changes, instead of letting the knees be the first thing that moves and kind of knee breaking to start the movement, in this time it's actually hips. And the reason this is because the bar sits down a little bit lower on your back. Your bar is actually not over the midfoot of your foot. It's not over here, where we want that bar path to be. So to start with, we actually load it into the hips, and that brings the bar a little bit forwards, and hopefully we can sit down in the same angle, pushing the hips back to keep this bar over and in line. So it's gonna come in like this and then straight down. That is the idea. With the high bar squat, you're gonna find that you push the hips back a little bit more, and for me, this becomes a little bit of a flexibility issue. And I hope it does it here. I hope I haven't warmed up enough, and I hope you see a big butt wink, because that will show you what you're not looking to happen. I've got tight upper hamstrings a little bit, so what happens when I get down low in my squat, my hips start to round. I will show you, and hopefully it does it. If it doesn't, I'll do it to make it happen anyway. So at the bottom here, I don't know, I can't feel it right now, but there's a good chance that my hips are under like that, which we really don't want. We want to keep that lordotic curve. So we want to keep that neutral spine still. We want the spine to be down and kicking out of the butt. So we almost want a little bit of a concave. So I know I've got that neutrality here. This is good. When I come down, does it start to do this? That's what we really want to avoid. And we want to get that bar to come in so it goes midfoot of the foot all the way up to where the bar starts. Because when the bar is over that mid part of our foot, that's when we're most stable. Okay, that's the center point of our body. That's where we're grounded. So we're not kind of off balance from the start. Okay, front squat. So with the front squat, basically what we're doing is we are loading the bar onto the front of the body. That allows us to load the quads even more and get the core engaged a little more. What I will say with front squats is, again, much like the low bar squat that I said earlier was just pinning the bar, the front squat, the hands are just cupping the bar. You're actually resting it on your shoulders. So you want to have the flexibility to get your elbows up here. If you haven't got the flexibility, a lot of that could be to do with tight lats. So you're gonna have to loosen them off. But we're gonna take our hands slightly wider than our shoulders. Basically, the reason we're doing that, because if they're there, they get trapped on the shoulders. Take them slightly wider than the shoulders, lift the elbows up. I've got this kind of motion in my wrist here, so the bar literally just sits in my hands to kind of lean it in place, and it sits on the front of my shoulders. That allows me just to take the weight on my shoulders, it's locked in place, I'm comfortable by my elbows lifted up, it's gonna be quite close to my throat, I'm gonna try not to choke myself, and I'm gonna come down into the movement exactly the same as if I was doing the high bar squat. The movement's no different, it's just the bar is on the front of the body. You will find with the front squat that you can keep your torso very, very upright. This is a good thing, and it should allow you to develop the quads a lot more too. So I'll go under the bar and I'll show you. If I was doing front squat, I'm gonna take my hands, A little bit wider than my shoulders. I'm actually gonna walk myself into the bar so my shoulders are touching and lift up like this. Now I have the bar in a comfortable position, my elbows are up and that's what's keeping it up. If I haven't got the flexibility, I've got this. And now my wrists are starting to take pressure and I can't deal with that. I don't want that. I want it up here. A lot of people you see sometimes do Zercher squats. I hate them. I don't think they're very stable. But again, if you want to do it, I'm not going to tell you not to. But I think as you get to higher loads, you're going to start to really kind of struggle and feel uncomfortable knowing that much weight's on there. And the only thing that's keeping it on there is your fingertips, really. Without doubt, the most flexibility-driven problem with squats is ankle flexibility. And what you find is when people try and get down with their squats, their heels start to come off of the floor because they just don't lack the flexibility in the ankle and the calves. So one thing you can do to get over this, apart from regularly exercising and stretching and mobility of the ankles, you know, stretching the calves out, is you can place the heels in a little risen position. You could do this using Olympic shoes, or you could use two 1.25 plates, little light plates, small plates, pop them under the heels and squat with your feet on the heels. This instantly opens the angle of the ankle, so when it actually does bend forwards, it's then not got as far to go in terms of ankle flexibility. This obviously isn't ideal, but I only have an Olympic plate, I don't have any single plates. But typically, you'd get a small plate and you'd have this position, where your heel is on the plate, so basically you can now squat down with your heels up, and it allows you to get much lower and much more comfortable position because your ankle flexibility is improved greatly. So try that, but use two small plates, like 1.25 kilo plates, because this one's obviously rounded, it might not be wide enough for your stance, and you just don't want to use a plumper plate to be doing this. So a few common asked questions to kind of clear up and hammer home. One is, can your knees go past your toes? They absolutely can. You want to be keeping your heels on the floor at all times, but if you've got very long shins, and depending on your femur length and how you biomechanically set up, your knees will come past your toes. If I go ass to grass, 100% my knees will come past my toes. Obviously, I don't want to be exaggerating that, and I don't want to be sending it further than it should be, but if your technique is correct and you're very tall, chances are that your knees might go a little bit past your toes. Hence why I personally, because I've had previous knee issues, use the low bar squat, because it doesn't allow my knees to go so far forward because I send my hips back instead. So that's the reason I choose to use the low bar squat predominantly. I will use the high bar squat, but I will use it with lower weights. But that's just me preferencing. That shouldn't have any impact on you or what you choose to do. Other things we need to remember is keeping our knees out and our knees to follow our toes when we turn our feet out slightly, because remember that allows us to drop between our hips. We must keep intra-abdominal pressure all the time. We've got our abs braced with a nice kind of diaphragm full, your lungs are full, and you've got a lot of air in you. That's going to brace against your spine and keep that neutral spine. We must try and avoid getting that rounding in the lower back or any part of the back, in fact. We must always pack our shoulders back lovely and tight, whether we're using a slightly closer grip in this position for high bar squat, or we're coming lower down and our elbows are slightly behind us for a low bar squat. Regardless, we're pushing on that bar or pulling that bar down and apart to keep that back packed tight, much like you try and keep your back packed tight with a deadlift. If you've got poor ankle flexibility, lifting shoes are great. If not, use two small plates. A lot of people will struggle with this. They will also struggle with thoracic extension. They will struggle with tight lats. If they're doing front squats, they will probably struggle with tight hip flexors and hamstrings as well. So these are commonplace areas that you definitely want to be working on. I would always do a little kind of mobility drill before you start squatting. You can Google that online, on YouTube. There's loads of things you can do just to warm up those areas and really get those kind of muscles that you want to work, like your glutes and your hamstrings and your quads, really firing up. Normally the glutes and the hamstrings, because they are muscles that people struggle to have the muscle and mind connection that great. So you really want to have that fired up and ready. So when you rely on them and you're down at the bottom of that squat and you want them to fire, they are down there and they are working for you. So I think I've just about covered most of the stuff for the squats. I'm sure there's a few things that I've missed. I'll try and put them in the description box if I remember once I've edited this. Like before, if you've made it this far through the video, hopefully you've enjoyed it, so please give it a thumbs up. Comment below what you want to see next. If you've got any creative kind of criticism to give me, that's fine. If you've got any help that you can give to other people, like, someone commented, said, I've got really tight ankles. Go, here's a link to the stretch that I use that really helped me. Just help people out. That's what we're all here for. Everyone's progressing. And really work on your flexibility. But I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll be back very soon with another one, and I'll see you soon. Bye, guys.